great to be together in this gathering today. My name is Roy Wilson. I'm with the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center. And because of the great hospitality and work of Dr. Bobby Adams, we were invited on campus last fall. So we're joined by two incredible warriors for justice. And this year, Congresswoman thought it appropriate to begin with individuals that have the distinction of having worked directly with Dr. King and who are still working today. So the five people, individuals that are coming this year or have already been here, they have that distinction. So, Dr. Herring, welcome back to being our president. It's wonderful. And Dr. Graber's been very hospitable and helping us get settled and connected. Thank you, Dr. Graber. Permit me to introduce both of you at the same time, and then I'll turn it over to Jack so that I can get out of the space between you and these wonderful elder statesmen of our movement. Bob Zellner was the first white field coordinator for the Student Nonviolent Organizing Committee, SNCC. He participated in help organize the Freedom Rides and the Mississippi Summer. He's continued to work ever since in various organizations in education and community and union organizing. He's also a history professor. Jack O'Dell began organizing, I think, when he was 10 or 11 in Detroit, because he delivered newspapers, and he was able to coordinate and get the community connected because of his newspapers. He really cut his teeth in the National Maritime Union during World War II. Brothers that were in the Maritime Union did some of the most dangerous work because their job was to take supplies from the United States on Liberty ships and get them to the troops without any armaments. So they were taking ships of goods, sometimes ammunition, through a minefield of German submarines. They did a very heroic job. And Jack became, after the war in the late 50s, the director of voter education for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Dr. King. Later became one of the fundraisers for the SCLC. And when Dr. King was assassinated, Jack went with Reverend Jesse Jackson and helped set up PUSH, Operation PUSH, and then, of course, later on, the National Rainbow Coalition, where Jack served with Jesse for about 20 years as the Director of International Affairs. He's also been the director of the news network Pacifica Radio. So please welcome Jack O'Dell, Bob Zellner.
Well, I'm very happy to be here today and to have the opportunity to exchange views with the students. I think that your generation has one of the great challenges in our history, because these are both difficult and hopeful times. Difficult because we see mass unemployment and the school crisis, and neighbor has been taken out of the word neighborhood. And the landscape of our lives has been one of danger and despair and disappointment. And yet, we do have a marvelous tradition to uphold. Where do we go from here? Dr. King's subtitle of that is Chaos or Community. Those are the choices. Corporate greed, war, racism, sexism has created a chaotic situation. Economic crisis is today one that's most severe. They want to refer to it as a Great Recession. But Bob, I remember the Depression, and I don't see a whole lot of difference. But sometimes a thing can be named cleverly so we don't understand the depth of the problem. In any case, chaos or community. The ability to build community at all times is like having a life jacket when a boat is sinking. America's in deep trouble because of the corporate greed and racism and sexism. But we, the people, are capable of making a difference. And this is an important time in our history to once again take stock of our experiences and see how those experiences instruct and inform us in our present situation. Life is a teacher. Life instructs us, but it also enables us to see new things, new developments, new opportunities in a difficult situation. So I will leave it at that for the moment, because I want to turn this over to Bob, and then we can kind of like have the kind of circular exchange, which all of us, one of the things about being able to sit down with folks is if we learn to listen well, we all learn. We all got ideas to express, but hearing each other enriches our ideas and gives us a sense of depth that we wouldn't otherwise have. So thank you for inviting me, and we're going to get into this.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to take the liberty to stand up because we are transplanting ourselves from way on the east. So this morning I woke up at my usual 5:30 and went to work, and I looked at the clock. It was 2:30 in the morning, and it was hours before it ever got daylight. So I'm going to stand up so I don't go to sleep. It'll be all right. I am Bob Zellner, and I was raised in L.A., Lower Alabama. I like that because when I say L.A., everybody thinks, oh, he's from California. Whoa. So, California is cool. It's good to be here. But anyway, I was raised up in Lower Alabama, and I think that one of the things that I could do today in just sharing with my friend and mentor, Jack O'Dell, is to talk a little bit about what it was like to grow up white in L.A., Lower Alabama. And the fact that my dad was in the Ku Klux Klan and my granddaddy was in the Ku Klux Klan, it was very unlikely that I would ever meet great revolutionaries like Jack O'Dell and work together in the same struggle. So many of us have come a long way. I admire Jack because Jack is a long-distance runner. Jack is an organizer to his heart. He has the cause at heart, and he's always had that. And he was an example to us as young people in the movement. He looks younger than me now, but he used to be a lot older. I don't know how he does it, but he stays young. I got older. But he was a great mentor for us. I was very lucky because I went to college in Montgomery, Alabama, starting in 1957. So if you remember what happened in Montgomery in 1955, and you'll understand how important an accident it was for me to go to school in Montgomery. And Dr. Herring knows Montgomery, worked in Montgomery, ran the, organized and ran a new YMCA there. Jack O'Dell knows Montgomery because he worked in Montgomery in the olden days. So when he was advising Dr. King, he was advising him from knowledge of the grassroots in Alabama. Bobby Adams, Dr. Bobby Adams saw what it was like in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he brought the vision here. So that's what we do as long-distance organizers. We bring what was good forward, and that's what the young people are doing now for us. The young people in Occupy, in organizing in colleges like this, where you have a wonderful movement leadership. I think that leadership is a movement leadership that comes out of the struggle, and it passes on that torch to generations. And I'm glad to see new generations of leaders coming along here. Some started as, as recently as January. But you can see the leadership in people's eyes and people's spirit and heart. Well, that's what happened to me when I was in Montgomery, Alabama. My daddy was in the Klan. My granddaddy was in the Klan. They were fundamentalist Christians. So you might say I came from a line of fundamentalist terrorists. And we talk about the fundamentalist terrorists around the world. And fundamentalism many times goes along hand in glove with terrorism, because fundamentalism says we have a community, and inside that community I won't hurt you. I will nurture you and I will take care of you. But if you're an infidel, if you're outside, I not only have the right to hurt you, I may have the obligation under religious principles to hurt you, kill you, destroy your country, destroy your culture. So when you have an opportunity to be here at this wonderful place on Mount Olympus here, with these great leaders and these great teachers, you'll see that you're a citizen of the world. Well, growing up in Alabama, it was difficult for me to become that. I never in my whole life, my whole early education, was able to attend an integrated classroom. I graduated college without attending a single classroom with an African American. In my college, we had Koreans, we had Iranians, Africans, so forth and so on. If you were black and you're from Africa, it was all right to attend my Methodist college in Montgomery. If you were black and an American, it was not only impossible for you to attend my college of Huntingdon College in Montgomery, it was against the law. If we suddenly, Jack, took this meeting back through the time capsule to 1959 or earlier in Montgomery, Alabama, every one of you would be guilty of committing a crime. What crime are you committing right now? That if you were doing this, only this, in Alabama in 1959, you would be breaking the segregation law. So when I was assigned in sociology class to write a paper about the movement, in a class in race relations, 5 of us told our professor, we're going to go talk to Dr. King and Mrs. Parks and Brother E.D. Nixon, a great labor organizer, who made this bus boycott here. We were in a race relations course. We've been assigned to write a paper about how to solve the racial problem. And our professor said, you can't do that. And we said, why? He said, because you will be arrested. So as young sociologists, our imagination was piqued by the idea that you could be arrested doing research for a paper. So being young and foolish, we said, we're going anyway. And our professor said, I don't want to know about it. Don't tell me. Don't do it. So forth. Well, we talked to Dr. King. We could meet him in the federal building. And if you were standing up in the hall, you could talk to a black person. In Montgomery, I learned my sociology. If you sat down and had a cup of coffee, you broke the law. But you could stand up or even ride an elevator together. Racism and segregation never made any damn sense. At all. But our professor said, if you go over there, you'll be arrested. So 5 of us went. Dr. King said, you can come, but you may be arrested. And we said, that's what our professor said. And he said, that's why he's a professor. He's smart. So the 5 of us went. It was a nonviolent workshop at Reverend Abernathy's church, First Baptist Church on Ripley Street. John Lewis was going to be there. Dr. King was going to give an address. A lot of people from SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, who had been doing the lunch counter sit-ins and now the freedom rides. And we were very excited to meet people who were doing something about what we already recognized as an evil. And they had the gumption to do something about it. So at the end of the meeting, Dr. King came over, and I swear he was smiling with a twinkle in his eye, and he said, the church is surrounded by the police, and the 5 of you are going to be arrested. Congratulations. So I said, Dr. King, we need to escape. So he said, well, Bob, you remember that little workshop we had about if you come, you might be arrested? And I said, well, what I mean is that we need to try to escape. We were so revolutionary and on fire for the movement. We were just brand new, and we didn't want to get our parents in trouble. We didn't want to get our school in trouble. So Dr. King, who was very good, courageous, and thought on his feet, he said, I tell you what I'll do. I'll go out the front, and if they all run around there, Reverend Abernathy and Mrs. Parks can go with you down to the basement, and you can run for it. So sure enough, Dr. King got ready to go out the front. And as we were standing there in this basement of this historic church in Montgomery, Alabama, my little mind was opened up when Mrs. Parks, that great saint of the movement, that silent, strong as granite individual, touched me on my left elbow. And I've never washed that since then, by the way. And she said, Bob, when you see something wrong, you're going to have to take action. You cannot study it forever. You have to do something. Now, nobody has ever had a commission like that from on high, other than Paul, maybe on the road to Damascus. From God struck him down and blind and so forth. So I was commissioned to do that. How could I not get involved in the movement? Well, sure enough, Dr. King went out the front. The police and the newsmen all ran around there. Reverend Abernathy opened the door. And the funniest thing, young people, you've ever seen is 5 little white boys running all out through the black community in Montgomery, Alabama, trying to get away from our own police. We had stepped over that magical line of segregation. And we had become suddenly, overnight, from one of the most privileged classes of people, middle class, white, southern, male, we had suddenly become outlaws because we had chosen to go to church. We chose to go to the wrong church, to hear the wrong preacher. So that was how I got started on my life of crime. Thank you very much.
As I've said before to both of them, I'm so privileged to have the opportunity to hear them talk. And I know we have a short time, but I'm sure they would entertain a question or two of you if you have any questions. I have one.
It's your privilege.
Being in the same era as you, when you got home, and your dad and your granddad, if he was alive, said, "What the heck did you do?" Which state is it?
Well, they were pissed. The question was, what did I do when I got home after that? Well, I'll tell it very shortly because it was quite amazing. That was when my real education started, Dr. Herring. That's when it started because, first of all, my father had already left the Ku Klux Klan. And his father, when he left the Ku Klux Klan, disowned him, took him out of the inheritance. His blood brothers never spoke to my father again in his entire life. That's what breaking with the Ku Klux Klan and breaking with the white stranglehold of segregation meant in those days in the South. Simply because the 5 of us had almost been arrested by the police, the president of our college, Hubert Searcy, the youngest president of any major college in the United States, who my grandfather had given the first offering to him as a young Methodist minister to go to college, told us that we had to withdraw from school. 5 of us were asked to leave school because we had broken the segregation law. The Klan burnt crosses around our dormitory, and a huge rally of Klansmen the next night occurred 1 block from the campus. 38-foot cross was burned. This was huge. The fact that 5 students, just in trying to find out, had stepped over the line. We were then called into the office of the Attorney General of the state of Alabama, McDonald Gallion, and he said, "You have fallen under the communist influence." Now, I said, "You mean it's communist in Alabama?" And he said, "No, but they come through here." So that was the whole thing in that time. If you took a stand on organizing women, organizing a labor union, trying to do something about segregation, you were an alien person, especially if you were white and you were stepping over. Now that was a backhanded compliment to the young black people, because even the white Southerners said they have a point. The young black people have a point. They're striking for their own freedom. But you're a white boy, get out of that business and don't have nothing to do with it. So our family took a lot of heat because they supported me in that. And it was like the Civil War all over again. The family ripped right down the middle. But thank goodness there was a movement for me to take part in, or because I would have been, the same. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to comment briefly on this. Bob has indicated to us the experience of living it up in the segregated South. Those are rich experiences, and our greatest problem has been there just been too few Bob Zellners. The white South was deprived of rights and opportunities, while at the same time they were told that their purpose was to keep the Negro in his place. And that assignment on behalf of the entire system meant that they did not have the opportunities that whites in the North had. So you had this segregation system in the South that was directed against the blacks, but the white poor and the general white population suffered a deprivation as a result of it. And we are now living in a period where, with some degree of desegregation, we are able to more clearly see what the real game was, Bob. And to see that there were layers of this system of oppression that had much in common with the fascism that we in World War II fought against. You see, it was the system in the South was held together by brutal terroristic rule of the police. The Southern police system was a police state. And that situation was the source of profits after the overthrow of Reconstruction. That was a source of big profits to the big corporations and so forth. Last year was the 75th anniversary of the publishing of Du Bois' Black Reconstruction. And the subtitle of that is a history of the part played by black people in the attempt to reconstruct the South. That was overthrown, but we are now in another phase of that same thing. And when we look at the situation of impoverishment, the South has now, during Roosevelt's time, they said 1/3 of the nation ill-clothed, ill-housed, and ill-fed. The South then was from Maryland down to Texas. What the South now is from the southernmost district of New York to Southern California. You see, we are in an economic crisis, but it also is one that has its manifestations in the war policy and the prison policy and the housing crisis. This is civilizational, and that means grabbing and understanding that is the way to our freedom. But at long last, we now have a body of whites and blacks and Latinos and Asian Americans and gays and lesbians. We have a cross-section of the population that have now reached a stage where they see each other. And as we see each other, we're going to see the possibility for change in this situation. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for being here and being in your presence and hearing your story. I'm very floored right now, because it's something I can't relate to, but it's something my mother came. She's Native American, and she came from the reservation in South Dakota, and the racism back there to her, the N-word was also used for Native American, but they just added the prairie, and so my mom used to tell me the stories that she went through on the segregation, because she went through as a Native American woman, and abuse and stuff. So me, as today, I have a son that's 14 years old, teenager, and he's half African American, and so the racism, I'm very, very grateful that you can interact with another race, another human being, not just on the race level, but it's another human being of another color or another culture. But me, my son growing up today as an African American male, even though he's half, he's still considered African American, is having me get, as a father, getting educated to a lot of stuff on African American history and the rights that he's still my struggle today, even though he looks half like me. We still, and I was going to ask you about the South, is there still parts where it's still segregated or any racism is still going on today? Like the Deep South, I've never been down.
Can I do a quick one on that? Yes, I can tell you that racism is still very strong, not only in the South. I've been living in Southampton, New York, for the last 15 to 20 years. And the Shinnecock Nation is there. It has a reservation and so forth. And just about 10 years ago, I had moved from down south to up south. I had moved from Alabama up to Southampton, New York. And I was working with the Anti-Bias Task Force. I was chairman of the Anti-Bias Task Force, appointed by the town of Southampton to investigate instances of prejudice and bias. And I was called to the Shinnecock Reservation, and they were bulldozing the burial ground, bulldozing an ancestral burial ground, a graveyard of Native Americans. And I interacted between the Native population and the state troopers. And I said, a restraining order has been gotten from the court keeping this housing development. They were going to make a housing development right over the ancestral burial ground of the reservation, right on the reservation. What used to be the reservation, now they say somebody else owns it. But as I was doing that, talking to the state police, I was grabbed by 4 state troopers from behind, thrown to the ground. In fact, the picture's in the book. My memoir is called The Wrong Side of Murder Creek, and I'll tell you why it's called that way. But look in the pictures if you don't mind. Derek knows where it is. Pass it around. I was 62 at the time, and when they tackled me, they broke my elbow in my right arm right here. and I was thrown into jail along with members of the tribe. And while we were in the police barracks, chained for 8 hours during the day to metal benches, the Diallo decision came down in New York City. I don't know if you know about Diallo. He was an African man that was shot 40 times by the state troopers or the police in New York. And while we were chained to this bench, the ruling came down that none of those policemen were even going to be tried. They weren't even going to be indicted or tried, and had shot the man 40 times. One of the most blatant acts of racism that had ever occurred. And those state troopers in New York State, not Alabama, came over to where we were chained to the bench, the Native Americans and little old me, and they said, the next time you want warpath on the reservation, the next time we'll come with our Winchesters. We can do anything to you we want to, and nothing's going to happen to us. See what happened to those police that shot Diallo. This is a mentality just in this decade. Not in Alabama, in New York State.
Any other questions? Yes.
One little thing that, you see, the fundamentals of American history are the theft of Indian land, the enslavement of Africans, and the exploitation